Well, Dr. Lalley truly has been a blessing, and he brings us the best practices, the best medical care, and compassion to all that enter our doors. And he's always present, and he really does a great job. Those of you family members around the table know the gift that he is to Quiet Oaks. So without further ado, would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Pat Lalley.
Thank you, everybody. The first slide I have up here, my wife looks at that and said, "You aren't showing family pictures." So yes, I am. But thank you all for coming tonight. First, I'd like to thank and recognize, if I may, Health Partners. And I'm sitting over here with my colleagues. I've been at Health Partners 37 years as a family physician. In the fall of 2001, the year that 9/11, I went and asked, could I take 3 months off, do a sabbatical in hospice and palliative medicine, and they said yes. 10 years later, I said, well, could I take 6 months off and go around the world and do some volunteering, and they said yes. And then finally in January of 2017, they're letting me take a lot of time off because I'm retiring from family practice and I'll continue the hospice and palliative practice. I really want to thank Health Partners and my colleagues for supporting Quiet Oaks and my hospice work all these years. You've been a great group. Thank you. Next, I wish to express my deep appreciation for all of you tonight. Quiet Oaks is dependent on all of us. When the doors first opened 9 years ago, it was clear that the objective was to provide the best end-of-life care for persons and their families in a home-like setting with a focus on comfort, quality, and dignity for the dying. We still do this. In fact, we do it better than we did when we first started. But in the process, Quiet Oaks has become enriched by all who have come through its doors and shared themselves and their stories. They are our teachers. So tonight, I ask the question, if you had 1 month to live, what would you do? What would you value the most? And what would you hope for? So let me start with a personal story. Many of you know my wife, Deb, but I bet you didn't know that one of her favorite things to do is to make and bake special cakes. Seeing as how our theme tonight is about eating our dessert first, it seemed only fitting that I share some of our family stories with you, how we celebrated happy occasions. So when our kids were growing up, Deb got the cake decorating bug, and so our kids were surprised on their birthday with, this is our daughter Erin with a clown cake. This is Danny with a Cookie Monster cake, and this is James with a Ghostbuster cake. And even I made a cake. And look how well I decorated that one. I think that's when Deb said, you better keep your day job. But one year, she made the mother of all cakes, a twins cake, to celebrate the World Championship of 1987. Our son Dan's 6th birthday was in January, and I think she was preparing this cake from October of 87 until his birthday in January. The cake was a carbon copy of the Metrodome, complete with base paths, green outfield, individual squares in left field where she had put each of the Twins players' name on it, like Senior Smoke. For some of you, that's Juan Berenguer. Kirby, Gags, Bert, Herbie, just to name a few. The day of the birthday came, and the completed masterpiece was a large sheet cake, Both she and Dan cried, I mean, they really cried with excitement as it sat on the counter. They needed to pick up some last-minute items at the store for the party and left me in charge of Erin, our daughter, who was age 3. I had to go down the basement for some napkins. And I left Erin upstairs. I couldn't have gone for more than a minute. I'm sure it was a minute. And I heard a large boom. So I went upstairs, and I was waiting to hear from the kitchen the cries that Erin had fallen off the chair. But when I got into the kitchen, a quiet scene unfolded before my eyes when I saw Erin standing on the chair. And to be honest, I was very relieved that my daughter, age 3-year daughter, was okay and she had not fallen. So my next move was to look at the counter, and something was missing. The cake. I looked over the counter, and there she lay. A seismic crack had erupted between third base and center field, and the players' names were, let's just say, they were harder to read. I will get back to this story in a minute, but I use this to illustrate what happens when our personal stories change and the anticipated future is replaced by disappointment and distress in the present. When it's more than cake on the floor, but a terminal illness or tragedy in life we face, the suffering can be intense and overwhelming. And it's not just the individual who suffers. In fact, those close to this person, families, friends, co-workers, and larger communities are deeply affected. We dwell in the past, blur the present, and fear the future. Think about it. Think about your own personal experiences. In the past few weeks, think about our community here in St. Joe. So hospice care is about recognizing and relieving suffering. Dr. Cicely Saunders, who's one of the pioneers of the modern hospice movement, described the concept of suffering in terms of total pain, including the physical, the emotional, the social, and the spiritual aspects. At Quiet Oaks, we intentionally remind ourselves of all of these dimensions when we care for residents and families. There's also the concept that suffering occurs when our life story is broken and our sense of personhood is threatened. Our story is our sense of ourself, who we are, and who we want to be. All of our life stories are filled with hopes and dreams, meaningful relationships, and great expectations. When we face a tragedy, illness, or even death, this story changes and we struggle to find meaning in these changes. But hospice care is also about relieving suffering. And we do it best when we take the time to listen to the stories and help people find meaning in the present. We are being taught daily by the courage, the grace, the strength, the love, the connection, the faith, and appreciation of life by those who are suffering, whose life stories have changed. This will certainly happen eventually to all of us. So, can we slow down? Open all of our senses. Be present in the moment. Focus on what really gives us meaning in our lives. And enjoy our cake and dessert. This really is the essence of care, not only at Quiet Oaks, but for all of us in our own lives. Again, the question, if you knew you had 1 month to live, what would you value the most? And if you knew what you valued the most, why don't you do it now? It takes resilience to get through difficult times, with a hope for the future and the support of those around you. I was hoping this was the case when Deb and Dan arrived back from the store and found the scene in the kitchen. I had managed to lift the cake back on the counter and push the earth together between infield and outfield and thought it might work. I said, "We've had a little mishap," when they walked in the door. This was one of my bigger exaggerations in my marriage. I went to the store and had to pick up another cake. But, Deb and Dan, they were crying again, but for other reasons. But when the kids arrived for the party, there was a lot of excitement in the house, and they all wanted a piece of the damaged twins' cake. So celebrations come and go in our family, and Deb continues to decorate cakes with imagination and skill. And her recent effort was the groom's dinner for our son Dan. So this is 26 years after that episode. And the next slide shows the twins' cake. So my final words are to encourage all of you to enjoy life. You never know when your life story will change. And as you are eating your dessert, savor the sweetness, but also appreciate the whole experience. The love, the work, the hospitality that went into it, and especially the people you share it with. Thank you.